Welcome to today's Flexi webinar. Happy 2021. Thank you for spending the first webinar of 2021 with us here today. We're pretty excited for it, starting out the new year. Today, our presenter, as normal, will be the wonderful Aron Clapp. He is Director of all training here at SAi. He knows Flexi inside and out. And today he's going to be talking about nesting in Flexi and Production Manager. So he's got a lot of tips and tricks and for nesting. So he'll go ahead and give that presentation for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for questions for you. So if you've had any nesting issues that you've been having or questions you've been wondering, go ahead and type those into the chat window, and we'll answer as many of those as we can. Or if you just have other questions about Flexi, we'll answer as many of those as we can as well. And I think that's about it. We will be recording the webinar as usual. So we'll post that to our YouTube channel, and we'll send you all a link. So if you need to leave earlier, or you want to go back and review it, work alongside as Aron's going over something, or you want to share it with someone, we'll send you the link so you can feel free to do that. And with that, we'll have Aron take it away.
All right, sounds good. Today we're going to be looking at nesting inside of Flexi. And so we're going to go through the true shape nester, and then we're also going to look at nesting inside of Production Manager. So that's a good part of what we're going to be doing for nesting as well. So there's two different ways we can do nesting depending on the approach that you want to take and depending on your workflow. So the good thing is Flexi and Production Manager are flexible like that, so you've got options. So first of all, we're going to start by just importing a couple files here. And let's see here. I'm going to import one of these pre-done files here, and then I'm going to also pull in some AI files. We're just going to use these as our files that we're going to use to nest everything and kind of play with here today. So there's just going to be some AI files, and we'll make some adjustments to these here. So I've got a plate here, or a kind of an artboard set up. Now this artboard can be accessed via Design Central, and I can change the size of this artboard here. I can also choose some different templates, or if I don't want to see it at all, I can turn it off, or I can set a particular one of these as a default, or I can add and create and delete different ones. So if there's a specific style of material that you want to use and kind of set up as your default, you can do that. So first of all, we'll just leave it at this, and let's just grab some of these and let's scale some of these down just a little bit. Make some of these a little bit smaller here, so they're kind of more of a decal style size here. All right, so we've got a few pieces here. Now there's two nesters in Flexi, and I'm going to mainly go over the true shape nester in Flexi, and there is a nester called the nest. You'll see this one here. This is a little more of a simple nester. You'll probably want to make sure that you have this true shape nest. This true shape nest comes in the subscription. So if you have a subscription, you'll see it there. If you have an older version of Flexi that maybe is not like a full version, it's not the Flexi Sign Pro, maybe you have a Flexi Sign or Flexi Expert, you may not see this option. This is definitely worth an upgrade if you don't have this true shape nester. It is much better than the regular nester in many different ways. So if you don't have it, I would highly recommend that you get it a subscription or pay for the upgrade to get this, because it's definitely worth your time. Let's just take a real quick look, and I'll kind of show you some of the limitations of the regular nester. So one of the big things in the regular nester that this one allows us to do, again, it's a very simple nester. It allows us to rotate the parts if we want to. It allows us to set a size of our material, width and height. We can define the colors and things like that, but it does not allow us to define copies. This is one of the kind of the bigger things that you'll see in this, is that you have to make your copies ahead of time in order to use this nester. So again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. This is, again, used for very simple nesting, and that's why we're going to spend most of our time on the true shape nester. So I'm going to grab these guys right here, and let's go to the true shape nester. So right away, we can see that we have a few more things here that we can use. So here's the size of our material or the panel that we want to fit this into. Now, conveniently, this here is set up to the same size as the plate that I set. So I can go higher or lower with this if I want to. And you'll see that reflected in this little line right here. So you can still see the material thickness or my panel back here. So that might be, if you don't want to see this panel, that might be a good instance where you'd go into Design Central and turn that off so that you can only see the area that you're nesting. But in this case, I'm going to use the same size as my plate back here. So that's not going to be too big of a deal. We can also set our space between the objects, so we can define how much space it's going to leave in between the edge of the material and the edge of the parts. So this is going to be 0.125 inches for this particular example. Then we have the rotation angle. Now this is kind of depends on what you're looking to do here. So the lower the number, the closer and the tighter the nest is going to be. So essentially what we're doing here is, if I set this to 1, it's going to rotate every part at a 1 degree interval until it finds the best possible solution. Now, the disadvantage to this is that it's going to take a long time to nest. So the higher count it takes, or the lower this number, the longer it'll take to nest. We probably are not going to see like a whole lot of differences in our example today, because we're probably only going to nest like 10 to 30 pieces. And so it's not going to be too big of a deal. But if we were nesting, let's say 100 or 200 of these, the 1% or the 1 degree is really going to make a difference in our nest time. So you might, check your expectations versus how long you want it to sit there and nest, and processing time and things like that. Generally, I find that 15 degrees is a pretty good even spot. If you're looking for a good nest that gives you fairly good flexibility, allows the parts to rotate pretty evenly, then 15 degrees does a really good job. Now, the nice thing is here that you can also lock it into something like 90 or 80 degrees. So if you only want this part, let's say rectangles, and things like that, bigger parts that you don't want them to necessarily move too much or get into like an awkward position, you can lock those in at 90 or 180 if we needed to do that there as well. So I'm going to say at 15. One of the nice things is you can see the compression ratio, or the compress ratio. So you can see kind of the yield that you're getting based on the percentage here. And so you can kind of see, you can try several different things and see how much you really gain by increasing it from 15 to maybe 10 degrees or 5 degrees or 1 degree. What I found out in the past is, if I look at this compression ratio, when I change it between 15 and I try and go lower, I typically don't get that much more yield from it than if I just use a 15 degree or something like that. So kind of depends on the shapes that you're using and things like that as well. Here's our copies. So we can dictate how many copies. I'm going to do 10 of each. And then we can decide how we want this to nest. So we can nest it from in this case, it's nesting from the left to the right. If I hit redraw, this is how it's going to show this to me. or I can have it nest from the bottom up. And if I hit redraw, it'll nest it from the bottom up. So I got different ways that I can do that depending on how I want that to come out on my sheet and things like that. Use holes. This is if you're going to be using some kind of a large cutout. Let's say you're cutting out letters of different sizes. If it can fit a piece or a letter into the hole of, let's say, like an O, or inside the hole of like a B or an R, then it will try and fit those in there. If not, if you uncheck this, then it just won't try and nest anything in there altogether. This is if you're really trying to get as much yield as possible. Now, break text. This is one of those ones that you may or may not want unchecked. If I have a set of text, and in this case, everything's grouped together, so it's not breaking them apart, and most of these graphics have already been converted to outlines, so there's really no text in here at all anymore. So all this has been converted to lines and arcs. But if I were to type up a group of text, do I want that text to be broken apart or not? If I say break text, it'll take your text and it'll break it into its individual pieces. So every single letter is going to be broken up into its own thing and then nested as closely and tightly as possible. This may be really useful if you're cutting out single letters. And you're going to be, depending on your use case scenario and how you're going to be applying those letters and how you're going to be using those. If you want to maintain the integrity of the text so that it doesn't get broken apart, because let's say they need to be a decal, or they're maybe the letters are going up onto like a window or something, and you want to maintain the integrity of the line, then you would just uncheck this option. This will make sure that the text stays together no matter what, and then it will nest it that way as a group. So once I'm happy with my drawing and I can go from here, I can say redraw. I can also add copies, so maybe I make 20 of each, redraw, and it'll reprocess it. The nice thing is here is if I go beyond my little plate, it's going to start a new plate up here, and it'll indicate to me which ones had got to be nested on the next plate. Once I like what I'm doing, maybe I go back to 15 instead. I redraw. I like this. This is good. I can go ahead and hit my green check mark and apply that. Now this is going to be my nest. And so now I can send this to the printer to be printed. The nice thing is this can be applied to jobs that have contour cuts or anything like that. So if you want to add contour cuts, graphics, any kind of file that you want to bring in, it will work. And so now let's go back here. I'm going to actually hit undo. And I just wanted to kind of quickly show you using the true shape nest here. So I'm going to hit 15 copies, hit redraw, and let's do, okay, there we go. So we can look at our compress ratio there of 86.9. If I switch this, say, to 1 degree and redraw, it's going to process for a moment. You can kind of see that in the bottom left here. It really didn't give us too much different. It gave us a little bit of a difference in our number, but not that much. So in the long run, you can kind of decide how much, that's really saving you in time and whatnot in terms of whether you want to go with your 1 degree or 15 degrees or whatnot. So that is the basics of the nester. So pretty powerful. It gives you a lot of flexibility, especially if you're trying to fit in odd shapes that you might have. So something like this, or stars, things like that. Any kind of vector artwork that's going to need to be, or that would benefit from the added ability to push these items together would be really great. Now these decals here, obviously they do have a little bit of a odd shape to them because they have a little bit of these graphics that are kind of sticking out. Like for example, this guy's got these white kind of bluish pieces sticking out here, so it can't really nest too closely together. But if you're doing other shapes and things like that, this might help you get the yield that you want to. Or if you're simply laying out maybe stripes or something like that, something simple, and you just don't want to have to do it by hand, this is a really great way to take this stuff, nest it real quick to get the best yield out of it possible before you send it to the printer or to the cutter for that matter. So this is the nester inside of Flexi. Let's take a look at the nester inside of our production manager. So this is a really great workflow if you use Flexi a lot, or if you design files and you like to bring them into Flexi and then send them over to the printer. Now, we know that some of our customers out there don't always use Flexi as their design application. They use Illustrator, Corel, and other applications. And that's great. And they import their files directly into the production manager. This is where we can still do nesting and still have a great product or to a great nest that we can use with contour cuts and all kinds of things. So let's pull up the production manager and let's go full screen with that. I'm going to import these same files. So import this one here, let it finish loading, add job, and let's go to our Illustrator files and pull those in. Add all three of those at once. We're just going to add them to our printer here. Okay, so one of the things to remember about the nesting is sometimes you get some trouble nesting, but we'll kind of talk about some of those here. But quick, what we do is we highlight all of these jobs, and I just hit the Shift key, click the first one, and then click the last one that highlighted them all for me. If I only want to highlight certain ones, I can use the Control key and unselect ones if I want to. You'll notice that when I do this, the nest button appears. When I hit nest, this will automatically nest these into a group job. So we can kind of see that now these 4 different jobs are under my nest. So they're kind of tabbed in a little bit. So this is all together. So now the thing to know is that these are grouped together as one unit. Now, if you've ever had issues with the nester, this is where kind of tech tip number 1 from tech support is if you ever have an instance where you select multiple files and the nest button doesn't work, or it just doesn't seem to want to work properly, one of the things to check is you may want to check the settings for each job. So typically the way that you want this to work is, let's just double click on this one, for example, is you want the material size to be the same on every job. So you want them to be, so if we're using a 64-inch roll, we want them to be 64. Or if we want them to be on a 32-inch roll, or whatever size of material you have, you want to make sure that they're all the same. Things like that. So I would also check your color correction tab. Make sure that your color correction tab shows that it has all the same settings for the most part. Now, if you set up your default job properties correctly, they should be importing with the same settings. And so that would be one thing you kind of want to just keep an eye out for. So check those. If it doesn't work, check to make sure the material is the same. Check your things like this. And also check some of your other tabs here. Just kind of make sure the settings are about the same. Now, obviously, we wouldn't expect the job size to be the same, so that's okay. But mainly, we're looking at the page margin size and your color correction settings to make sure that they're matching up. So we're going to go ahead and nest these together, and then what we're going to do is we're actually going to just double click on the main job up here, and now it's going to pull up basically the same default job properties panel that you would normally see, except for now all the jobs are listed in here. Now the cool thing about this is that I can add individual copies as I want. So for example, I can say currently I actually have all the pieces selected. So I can actually drag and select, or I can click and shift click if I want to select multiple items like this, and I can say I want 10 copies, and it automatically will nest them for me. Now, say I look at this and say, well, actually, you know what? I think I only want 10 of those airborne, or 5 of those airborne signs. I can now go in here, I can click the airborne, change the quantity, hit tab, and it'll update and automatically renest everything for me. I can also do this ahead of time if I want to. So let's set all this back to 1. I can go in here and double click on each job individually, which will pull up, this will pull up basically the same view that we had before, except for now it allows me to change it. So it automatically highlighted the blue one for me. Now that's a little bit of a difficult way to kind of go about that. I would just recommend grabbing these. It's easy enough. You can just click on each one of these individually and just send them that way. I can put in individual amounts for each one. So 5 of this guy, click on this guy. Let's just do 10 of these. Let's do maybe 12 of these, and then maybe 8 of these. So I've got a different quantity for each one. And now the nice thing here is that it automatically nested it for you. Now, even though the manual nesting is checked, the first time you change a value, it's going to automatically do a nest for you. If I uncheck this, that means that the automatic nest is on by default, and it's not going to allow you to change anything. If I do click this option, now I can actually grab some of these pieces. So for example, I can grab this guy right here and just move it out of the way and say, I want it up here instead. And it'll allow me to manually nest these files if I want to. And if I change a bunch of this stuff and I uncheck the manual nesting, it's going to automatically renest it for me. So if I ever get to a point where I'm like, I don't think I like what I did, I can reset everything by unchecking the manual nesting option, and then I can make some more changes as it is like that. So a really good, powerful way to do this. Again, if you're importing jobs with a contour cut, one thing to mention is that you do want to keep your contour cut jobs together, and your print and cut jobs together, versus mixing a bunch of them. So just be aware of that. That can also cause some issues when trying to nest. But pretty powerful. It allows you to just import files if you don't use our designer, or even if you just have files that you've already created and you don't necessarily want to go to the effort of importing those files into Flexi. You can always just import them right into Production Manager. Production Manager, you can import all kinds of different files. So if we go in here and click Add Job, we actually have the ability to import the same kind of files that you do in Flexi. So if it's an AI, EPS, PDF, Photoshop, Flexi file, all kinds of different things. So you can import these files directly into Production Manager, even if you created them in Flexi before. This applies for like car wrap panels, decals, stickers, all kinds of different things that you might be doing and want to nest together. This is a really good way to accomplish that. And so you can nest your contour cut jobs together. You can kind of pile all these up and then not have to open up Flexi at all. You can just do it directly from here. So with that, let's go to any questions. We're right about the 25-minute mark. So do we have any questions?
A couple that came through. The first one, when he said, in Production Manager, the nest button is grayed out sometimes, and I have to close the software and reopen it in order to be able to nest. Have you encountered that before, Aaron?
So I would probably make sure that we have the and I'd mentioned the things before to check the material size and things like that. If you get to a circumstance where you have to close the software and then all of a sudden it starts working, I would almost wonder if we have like kind of a corrupt preference file or something that's causing some kind of a glitch or an error. So we may want to either try and reset those or something like that. because that definitely would seem strange if you had it open and you couldn't nest, but then close the software and then reopen, and then all of a sudden you could nest. So that would seem kind of weird to me. I would imagine that we would probably want to take a look at that and either try and reset the preferences, because preference files can get corrupted by antiviruses and other things. And so that could be a problem there. And kind of see if that helps. And if it doesn't, then we might want to investigate a little bit further. But that might be worth checking in with tech support to see if we've got an issue there. But I would try those things.
Okay, thank you. And Brian, yes, we are recording the webinar, so if you missed the beginning, we'll put it up on our YouTube channel and send you a link so you can watch the first part of it. And then Wendy had another question, Aaron, with the labels. She said, is there any way to get different numbers on each of the labels?
Inside of the production manager, there is. So I showed that. In the designer side, unfortunately, there's not. It's kind of an all group type of thing. So you select them all, and it kind of nests as an entire group. So there's no way to select each one individually. Unless you nested them separately, you could do that. You could nest one and then the other and then the other. But I don't think that would really provide you with that great of a nest because it doesn't take in consideration all the pieces. So yeah, that might be something to look into. If you have the files already created, you may just use the production manager nesting, or just set copies for all.
Okay. And then let's see here. James said, if you are using the nesting tool, is there a way to set the cutting order of the plot file to help prevent skewing?
There is. There's several different things that you can do inside of the software to prevent that kind of a problem. By default, the software should try and go from the origin point to different areas inside the file. So these are not going to be real good examples for cut files. But let's just say we've got a couple different shapes here. And let's say we're going to nest a bunch of these together. So now that we have a nest here, why don't we try grabbing all this? There's one of two things that you can do. First of all, let's just take a look at the cut settings. So it's going to naturally start in the origin point down here, or depending on your cutter, the origin point may be over here. And it's going to try and work its way through here as much as possible. Now, if you go to your advanced settings here, it's under one of these tabs. I think it's the last one. Let's see here. Optimize cutting order. So here's what this does. If you turn this option on, what this does, it says, okay, once I finish this cut right here, it's forcing the software to look no more than 10 inches away to find the next cut. So in other words, what this is going to prevent it from doing is finish this cut and then go all the way back to the back to cut another cut back here. So you could reduce this to say like 5 inches and say, I want it to only look within 5 inches of its original cutting or the ending point of the last cut to find the next cut. So it's not going to try and jump all the way across the media. So it'll go from here to here to here to here, here, and it's probably going to do a bunch of these stars, and it'll do some of this versus cutting here and then jumping all the way across. So do know that can be a way to solve that. The other thing that you could do is you can use the cut order tab. So if you go to cut order, I can say reorder my cuts, and then I can tell it what cuts I would want it to do first. So in this particular case, I would probably want to nest this the other way so that it wouldn't be rotated like this. But it's going to show me here where the first cuts are. So you can see 1 and then 2 goes all the way up here. So what you may want to do is rearrange some of this and say, no, I want this to be my first cut, or I can come in here and set these manually. So what I'm doing here is I'm just clicking on these, and that's setting the cut order. So I could tell this, if I clear this and do it again, I can say I want this one to be 1, this one to be 2, 3, and I don't have to go through here and do all of them. I can just kind of do the ones that are kind of important to me, and then it'll kind of, you know, sort itself out, and then you can kind of see where it's going next, and see, and so we can kind of go through here and apply some of these and say, okay, once I'm done with this, it probably doesn't really matter. Let it kind of do its own thing, you've got different options here on how you want to sort it by X, Y, or if you want to maximize the speed. So I can do that. And of course, I have all these options selected, so I need to undo this here to make sure that works properly. But this would be a good way to determine that. And you've got some different things. You can change your cut origin, things like that. So I might want to change my cut origin to this side instead, and then rerun it and see, you know. So there's some things you can do there as well, in addition to the settings in Production Manager, to solve that problem.
Excellent. Thank you, Aaron. And let's see, we got a question from Kelly. Says, you mentioned keeping contour versus non-contour cut job separate. Is that both true nest in Flexi and Production Manager, or Production Manager only?
That would be in the Production Manager only. So in here, you can nest multiple jobs together, types of jobs together, and you should be okay. There shouldn't be an issue there. It's mainly what we prefer in the Production Manager is to keep nesting jobs together versus non-nesting jobs, because the nester in the Production Manager is a little bit more of a simpler nesting tool. It doesn't allow you to set like rotations and stuff like that. It doesn't have the ability to rotate the files, and so there's a little bit of a simpler nester to it. So we would just recommend, say, hey, put all your print jobs in one, nest those together, and then your print and cut, you could do those, you know, separately. But in the design portion itself, because Flexi is the one that's controlling, you know, how the contour cut's going to apply, you know, and different things like that, it's organizing all that. It kind of knows how to set up the cut file properly so that it matches up correctly with the way that you're printing it.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Okay, I think we're caught up on all the questions. If anyone else has any other questions about nesting or anything else. Perfect. Thank you, James. It says, if you are running multiple passes in your plot file, can you make the second or third pass run before the whole sheet is finished with the first pass?
You know, that's a good question. I know you can set your passes here. I don't know that you can have it run the entire file in one pass, come back and run the file again on a second pass. And then I think, again, by default, one of the things that the software does is it tries to not let the software or let the machine go too far of a distance, because the more times that you back the material in and out of the plotter, the more it can become skewed. So if I let the entire file, and this is not that long of a job, it's 36 inches, but let's say I had a job that was like, I don't know, longer, like 80 inches or something like that. And if I let that whole job cut once and then go back to the beginning again to cut again, there's always the possibility of it having skewed just a little or just enough to where that second cut, when it goes to do the second pass, it's not going to line up properly. So typically in the industry, they prefer to do 1, 2, 3 passes, how many passes you're doing first on that object before it goes too far, just because of alignment issues.
Okay. Gary asked, how does Program Manager recognize contour cut directly from the AI or EPS file?
That's actually a really good question. So the way that works is all you have to do is set up a spot color. So in Flexi, if you look at our toolbar down here below, you have all these gray colors that have the little dot on them. The little dot indicates that it's a spot color, and it's just labeled cut contour. So it doesn't have to be gray. It could be pink, red, blue, teal, black. It could be any color you want. So all you have to do in Illustrator, CorelDRAW, or any other application is define a spot color and then name that spot color cut contour as it's labeled here. So capital C for cut and then capital C for contour with no spaces. And then if you want to make additional contour cut colors for, say, different types of cut, then you just add a 1 or a 2. Or if you want to define a perf cut color, you would do the same thing. Create a spot color and then label it as perf cut contour. And then that would automatically recognize inside of Production Manager as a cut contour.
Okay. And then they'll ask, what do the blue and red arrows at the bottom right represent?
You mean in the cut plot screen?
Yeah.
These are your origin. So if you look up here, your 0 is right here and your 0 is right here. So this is the origin for your machine typically as how you'd see it on your machine. So some machines will have it on this side. So that's what the blue and red arrows indicate.
Okay. And then Yolanda said, so does it jump from one design to the other, like from the arc to the star and back to the arc design, then the circle?
Yeah, so what it would, so if we were to look at the cut preview on this, going from here, if we just look at what the preview is going to do, it's going to start here, and then it's going to move to number 2, which is up here, and then move 3. Now, in this case, we don't have very good optimization set, so maybe we set this to maximum speed, and you can see here where it's changed things a little bit. So if we set it to maximum speed, the things are much closer together. It's trying to cut things that are closer within each other, and it's making a pattern to where it moves around and then comes back to the origin point, so it doesn't have to traverse too much. You can also, set this by y coordinates. So in this case, it's trying to move back and forth by y or by x. You can also tell it to optimize the start points. So it's going to try and optimize these as much as possible. Let's just say we do maximize speed. This is going to optimize it as close as possibly can. This, I would say that if you're doing something like this, this is going to be a pretty general consistency throughout the file you're going to get. You're going to get this cut. Again, if you want to prevent it from looking too far away, so for example, if that's too far for you to have it jump, that's when you're going to adjust that other setting in here. But yeah, it's basically going to do one object at a time, unless they're grouped together. So typically, if an object is grouped or several objects are grouped together, there is a maintain grouping where it'll cut that group together first before it moves on to the next one.
Okay. And we have another comment from Ben here. Says, we do punch cut stickers a lot. We have 2 cut lines, one for regular cut and one for punch cut. Sometimes when we step and repeat in Production Manager, it will cut in order and other times not. What can we do to choose the order rather than this way you have been showing by doing it manually?
So if you're doing a step and repeat type thing and the decals are basically the same size, so let's just take object like this, and let's step and repeat it. Other than if you import the job into Production Manager directly, there's not a way to change the order of the cut necessarily. When doing multiple cuts, it's going to do each cut typically at a time. So it's going to do all of your contour cuts first, and then go back and do all your perf cuts second. Let's see here. Let's do step and repeat. And if we look at this from a, of course, these are pretty small little graphics, but this is really the kind of the only way to arrange this cut order in this way. So so in this case, it's just going to go back and forth, and we look at it from our cut plots standpoint. Because I'm rotating it, it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 like this, and then kind of cut this direction. One of the other things you can do is you can also set unidirectional cutting, or you can have it do some other things in here, so you can tell it do clockwise or counterclockwise. For the most part, the software kind of indicates what it's going to do. So it's usually by default in the Production Manager is always set to the fastest cut, trying to keep it starting in the origin. So if you're having like a lot of issues with contour cutting in certain directions, we may want to have you get in contact with tech support. We may want to take a look at the files and just see how it's doing and what it's doing to kind of get the scenario as to what's happening with that particular file.
He had a follow-up comment. The issue we have most is when it does the punch cut, it will cut the first row first and then go back 3 rows and cut those. The stickers start falling out and bunching up.
Yeah, so what I would probably do is the first thing I would recommend is just start by using the cut order in here and making sure that if you're doing a step and repeat, that we're organizing the cuts in this way. Now, from the Production Manager, the problem that I see is that there's no real way to, so if we unnest this and just take, for example, one of these and double click on it, well, of course, you can't do necessarily a cut here, but let's check our default job properties here, and there might be something in here we could set in here, although I kind of don't think so. So we have some of the same settings. Let's see. So there's not nearly as many options in here as there are if you send it from the designer. So yeah, it's going to be one of those things where we'd have to maybe take a look at the file and see if we can figure out why it might be doing that specifically, because it shouldn't jump it shouldn't jump around too much. And it might also depend on what version you're running too. That might also, I mean, I know tech support would, if you called in or got somebody, we'd probably want to check the version, because I know that there's been some changes made in the past on that. Although, I just don't know. We have to verify that as well, just to make sure we're on the latest version and things like that.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's just about all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Aaron, for going over all of that and answering those questions. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's Flexi webinar. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your day, spend it with us. Our next Flexi webinar will be, let's see here, it'll be in February. Looks like it'll be February 9th, and we'll be talking about auto serialization in Flexi. And we'll send everyone out an email with a link to register for the webinar. And we hope you have a safe and prosperous year, and we will see you next month. Thank you.